Sweet.
All right, all right. So what's going on, everybody? Here. So it's Can Do here. You know what I'm saying? My guy Bice was throwing up in the background. So basically, Serge, Bice, and myself facilitating these book club meetings. And yep, today we're going to be talking about book number 2, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. All right, let's go on to the next slide.
Yep.
All right, so as far as the meeting goes, here's what the outline looks like. The agenda, we have our book introduction and overview. Then we're going to talk about this concept called wealth files, which is what the author talks about in terms of the different ways that rich people think about money versus, let's just say, people who are middle class and maybe even poor. And then lastly, we'll go through some key points, conclusions. We'll have some time here for Q&A, and then we'll have some closing remarks and reminders. Yep, no, you're good. Feel free to go ahead, brother. All right, yep. So as far as the intro and overview goes, so first things first, as you can see here, there's 4 parts. Who is the author, and then why we should read this book. And then he goes into part 1, which is your money blueprint, which is an important term that I think is, well, not even I think, it is a fundamental piece of this book. So that's an important part for you to focus in on and ask yourself that question and figure out like what that means to you and how you can apply it to your life. Then we go on to part 2, when we speak about the actual wealth files. There are 17 of them. We'll go through line item by line item, give you a chance to better understand each of them. And then lastly, the last part is, what are you going to do now? And that's relatively simple, but we'll talk about that when we get there. So let's go ahead to the next slide.
Cool.
All right, so these slides are going to be a little bit more wordy because there's so much good information in there. And because of that, we use the automation function so that way you can't read ahead. And ideally, you can focus in point by point. So let's go ahead and let's get that first couple clicks going. So first thing he says is, don't believe a word he says. And that's important for a couple of reasons. Even though he believes these items to be true, these are true based on his personal experiences. So with that said, he offers us to take everything, try and apply what makes sense to you. Actually, we'll apply all of it. Whatever works, keep doing it. Whatever doesn't work, feel free to throw it away. But that's the biggest thing here. And he prefaces it with that, which I think is good because it shows some integrity. It says somebody just always like, oh yeah, I know the answer is this, that, and the third. Next, if your subconscious financial blueprint is not set for success, nothing you learn, nothing you know, and nothing you do will make much of a difference. And it's I don't want to jump too far ahead, but he goes ahead and explains this a little bit further on, especially when he starts talking about that term, financial blueprint or money blueprint. And that's going to be, you know what, I'll leave it at that. That's going to be a good item to talk about. And then I'll talk here about quickly his story, give you guys some background in terms of who he is, where he came from, and then why he wrote this book and how it all kind of comes together. So simply put, in his early 20s, he was struggling and he was a failure. His father was a builder or in construction. He talks a little bit about that. And sometimes how when his father got into a project, things weren't that great in the household. And it was kind of like up and down. But however, after his father finished the project and sold the houses, he was on top of the world. And he spoke about his father's money blueprint, even though that kind of comes along further on in the book. The reason that kind of comes in here when we talk about how old he was in his 20s and his actual experience trying to start businesses, he kind of had the same kind of yo-yo effect, but he first started off really struggling, like really, really struggling. And he kept failing and failing and failing, leaving his house, coming back. And eventually he came back and he was staying in the basement. And then one time while struggling, he said to himself, well, pardon me, his father and their friends were playing cards. And then one of his father's friends was super successful. It's like, he sees him, and then he saw the author, the father's friend, who was very successful, and like he had this like look of pain in his eyes. The author talks about, oh yeah, it's almost like the look that's saved for a funeral, and it's because, and he knew that his father was talking to his friend about his son struggling, who happens to be the author of Harv. And then at that point in time, this is where the second bullet point comes in. He goes, Harv, I started in the same way as you, a complete disaster. But then I got some advice that changed my life, and I'd like to pass it on to you. And then the author, Harv, he's kind of intrigued, kind of beat up, and he really didn't want to hear it, but he's like, you know what, nothing else is working, let me hear him out. And he says, Harv, if you're not doing as well as you like, all that means is there's something you don't know. And that's super important too, because like that's something that really resonated with me. At the end of the day, it's really what you don't know. And once you have an idea and you're clear on it, it's so much easier to take action. We can hop into that later on. But then he's like, did you know that most rich people think in very similar ways? And then the father's friend goes on to explain, it's not an exact science, but rich people think a certain way, and then poor middle class people tend to think a completely different way. And this is where the TAR, thoughts lead to actions, actions lead to results. And that's like the first time we kind of get a hit with that sequence of events. All right, let's go ahead and hit that last bullet point. Yeah. And then anyway, with that said, after that conversation, the author, Harv, realized that his mindset was the biggest obstacle to success. And he started challenging his thoughts and opened his first business that was super successful since that conversation, which was a retail fitness store, which he went on to basically have 10 stores. And then he was crushing it. He sold half of them to a Fortune 500 company, made $1.6 million, moved to California. And then he started teaching people what he knew. And that's more or less by teaching people 2 turn to 5, 5 to 10, so on and so forth. And he started into doing these seminars and almost creating a school for this. And that's where this book was born from, teaching the same mental wealth files that allowed him to make that transition, which is what we're going to go over in this book. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so the money blueprint. Let's see here. Serge, you want to take this one? You want me to continue going?
I could chime in. Okay, so what does the author mean by the money blueprint? One preset program or way of being in relation to money. This blueprint, more than anything and everything else combined, will determine your financial destiny. The way I took this was like, not everyone's money blueprint is going to be the same, but the fundamentals that he teaches us is essentially the blueprint that we could all build on as individuals to get ahead in life. And that's like, I think, the biggest lesson I took from the money blueprint. Your financial blueprint consists of a combination of your thoughts, feelings, actions in the arena of money. Thoughts, feelings, actions, results. And honestly, this is like 100% true, because like yesterday, I was sitting down with, Kyle, Miguel, and Miguel's talking about how like he wants to get started on Airbnb, and he's learning all these things. He's asking me all these questions, but I notice he's hesitant to get started because he's scared. And that's the only reason. When we broke down like everything, when it comes to like the risk that he has to take and everything else, I'm like, you have mentors like me, Sid, we have people in the network that would help you. So what is it that's really stopping you? And once he realized that feeling that was stopping him, it's allowing him now to start looking at the problem in a different light. So I think a lot of the times understanding your thoughts and the feelings you're having that are stopping you from taking action is just as important, because a lot of people never realize this or are not self-aware enough to do it. And because of this, they never take action and they won't get the results they want. And so that's what I think it matters. The book, just as there are outer laws of money, there are also inner laws. Roots create the fruits. It's what the underground that creates what's above visible, mental plus emotional, spiritual, and physical. And I don't think we talk about this enough, how important it is to be like more or less mentally, not only mentally strong, but emotionally aware of yourself, so that you could be in a good place in mind to make decisions when the opportunity presents itself. You could study all you want, you could do all these things, but if you're not mentally prepared, if you're still afraid to fail, if you're still afraid to make mistakes, that's always going to stop you from pushing forward and might actually make you give up right when you're about to like hit gold. So it's like, it's really important to have the right mindset. It's not enough to be in the right place in the right time. You have to be the right person in the right place at the right time. And I can't tell you how much this is true. This one hit home for me because like in my 20s, I don't tell people this, but I tried so many businesses. I created a gambling site, which failed, which was like to gamble on like sports betting. I created a dating site that failed. I created so many apps, but I wasn't in the right headspace to understand how to build a business model around apps, how to do marketing, how to do all of these things that I've been able to learn through real estate and other stuff. So like every failure that I ever had taught me a lesson of things that I'm lacking or things I need to learn. And I think a lot of the times people hit these failures and they just completely give up on themselves. And being in the right place at the right time, being that person at the right moment, that's when you really start to kind of hit the ground running. It'll really make a difference, I think, in your life. So let's go on to the next
Sure. As a
one.
matter of fact, let me add a
Go
couple of
ahead.
things too, because I love that example they use, Serge, and you hit it right in the head too, because we're going back to that inner world and the outer world. And he talked about this even in the book. When people talk about the outer world, looking at their results, the fruits of their labor. But the reality situation is if you want to change the results, you also have to change the roots. So, and Serge's example is perfect. He's like, oh, okay, well, what are the roots here? The results are, I tried these things and they failed. The roots, oh, you know what? Even though I built this thing, I need to go ahead and build a business model around that supports it, the marketing aspect, the promotion aspect, also like the sales aspect, so on and so forth. And literally by updating and upgrading his mental files or the programs he's running, which we'll talk about in a moment, he was able to then start changing the results to the point where like now he's obviously crushing. I wouldn't say crushing, but he's doing his thing in the real estate game. You know what I'm saying? Like definitely like one of the furthest ahead. And I'm trying to learn from him as well. But anyway, thanks for sharing, Serge. Let's go ahead to that next slide. All right, so yeah, your money blueprint, we're gonna wrap up here. So top takeaways and examples. Programming leads to your thoughts, therefore, so we've got Jay here. So therefore, just like a personal computer, by changing your programming, you take the first essential step to changing your results. Great example by Serge that I just kind of reiterated. So it's gonna be your programming, aka like what did you experience around money? Like what happened when you were young, so on and so forth. That then gives you your thoughts. Your thoughts kind of based on your thoughts, it'll make that feeling inside of you, and that discomfort feeling, or that let's just say what's the word I'm looking for? Inspired feeling. Those different feelings cause you to take action, and those actions, especially based on your programming and the knowledge you have, is what's going to create those results. All right, how well you or your business does is a result of your money blueprint. You will always validate your money blueprint. He gave really good. He gave a couple good examples here. One is a thermometer or thermostat. That was one example that I'll talk about in a second. But the other one is just actually was very similar. Essentially, like a thermostat. If you have a thermostat in a room, it's set to 70. You open up a window, it's cold outside. It's going to kick on. And it's going to keep the room at 70 degrees. If it gets super hot, the heat's going to kick off, or maybe even the AC may kick on, and it's going to again keep the room at 70 degrees. So that thermostat is like your financial blueprint. So the reality situation is if you're only making 50 grand a year, that's what you're comfortable. Not only is what you're comfortable at, that's what you expect to make. And that's what your financial blueprint is. Same thing with somebody at 100 grand. Yeah, you may have an event happen that may bring you up higher or down lower, but you'll always sell that financial blueprint or wherever you set your thermostat, which is why it's important to understand what goes into that and why you're thinking and feeling the same way you're feeling. Because if not, your results are going to go ahead and it's just going to be a downstream effect. So anyway,
Hey,
with that,
before we go further, I just want to ask Serge a question as well. Dude, before you started seeing success, Serge, was there anything, and I thought about it in a different point, that's why I don't want to go any further, but was there something that you noticed you could have done consistently that would have got you success a lot sooner, right? So you said you went through a few failures. Is there something that if you would have, like if you look back, if you would have done consistently, you would have actually succeeded? Or would you say that it was a matter of just time and just continuing to punch and moving forward?
A lot of it for me was also just not seeking the right mentors or like surrounding myself with the right people. I understood the theory and the knowledge behind a lot of the things that I was reading, but I never positioned myself in an environment to win. And I think the moment I realized it was when I graduated college, because I went to USC and that's a huge alumni. And when I was there, I was getting fostered by a lot of entrepreneurships and mentorships and like how to do tech startups. And it was great. But once I left that ecosystem, I didn't have that for like 2 to 3 years. And I was making money, grinding, doing the code thing. You know, I started earning over 6 figures. I was still working hard to go up the corporate ladder, but I wasn't accomplishing my side businesses or the things I was doing. They weren't succeeding because one, I didn't have the time, and two, I just didn't have the people around me to do it. So what made me just like basically just bite the bullet and say, you know what, you've earned enough money, you have enough saved, move to Denver, work for bigger pockets, and give this a go and surround yourself with people that are actually doing it. And if I would have done that sooner, like much sooner, I think I would have probably been further ahead on the real estate stuff, like way further ahead, because I could have easily bought properties probably when I was in college, if I had surrounded myself with the people when I was in school to do these kind of things. Granted, I also wasn't making over six figures, so applying for a loan would have probably been impossible. So like, there's a lot of factors that go into it. It's like, could I have done it sooner? Yeah. But I also mentally wasn't mature enough, I think, to even handle that sort of debt and that much money being passed around. Like, I was a brokey in college. I was surviving off $100, barely paying my car payments. The idea of having to be responsible for a mortgage in my mid to early 20s, I can't imagine that kid being able to do that. He wasn't mentally in the right headspace. So understanding that about myself now, it's like, I think I'm at the perfect point in time, because also the real estate stuff, the reason it started working is because technology came out for it. Zillow became very popular. You could do all of the calculations online. You could do management through the internet. That stuff didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. So everything I used to automate my business today didn't exist back when I was in my 20s. So it kind of became the perfect storm, but I did a lot to prepare for it. So even though I was broke and I didn't know anything, preparing yourself through education, which is why I think stressing the idea of like investing in yourself, educating yourself and putting yourself in the right social groups while you're not hitting it big, I think that's more important than anything else, and it'll help you get there faster.
Yo, great question, Bison. Excellent answer, Serge. I really appreciate that for a couple of reasons. And and it goes right to that next point. Your income can only grow to the extent that you do. Young Serge at USC, at the end of the day, he wasn't quite brolic enough. You know what I'm saying? He didn't have the roots. He didn't have the roots set on the ground to really start pulling the nutrients, you know what I'm saying, to grow into the Serge tree that he is today. And it's funny too, because we are all going to be on different paths in some way, shape, or form. And such a great question, Bison. Thank you again for asking. And then Serge, awesome response. And then now, as far as the final thoughts on the term money blueprint, let's get one more click, please. So the actual amounts of money doesn't matter. What matters is that you're reaching your full financial potential, whatever's going to make you happy. Because for you, it could be 25 grand a year, and that's more than enough to live in Mexico and serve, right? Which is an example from our last book. Or it could be $1 million a year, so that way you can go ahead and make impact, change the world, or whatever the case may be, or change your own little personal community. But the important part is making sure that you're aware of your financial blueprint so you can live the life that you want to live intentionally. All right, let's go to the next slide. And we're moving on here to the wealth files. So we'll just hit these like one by one. Those in the chat or on the call, feel free to chime in if you have anything to add on to any one of these wealth files. And yeah, so let's start with it. The first one here, I'll take the first one, and then Serge, I guess we'll alternate each other. So the first one here, rich people believe I create my life, poor people believe life happens to me. So there's a really great term, it's called locus of control. And now where do you believe it resides? If you believe, so you have an external locus of control, and you have an internal locus of control. If it's external, that means you believe that your life circumstances are dependent upon your environment, what happens to you, you really can't do anything. It's very much a victim mentality. And you never want to have a victim mentality because you are always powerless to stop it because you can't control what's outside of you. However, if you shift your mindset, again, we're talking about like mental wealth files, if you shift your mindset to being internal locus of control. Okay, this happened because I wasn't prepared enough. This happened because I wasn't educated enough. This happened because I didn't keep my head on a swivel, whatever the case may be. And that's what rich people tend to believe. They believe I create my life, I'm responsible for everything. And depending on how rich they are, the more and more ridiculous and outlandish what they believe they're responsible for becomes. Like, for instance, is a great example. I know, like, I read this book, and ideally we'll probably read it later on, The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. He talks about like, oh, well, you know what, the power of my house went out, and then now I have food going bad, this, that, and the third. He's like, is it my fault the power of the house went out? He's like, of course it is. Because I could have had a generator, I could have had solar, I could have had this, I could have had that. When most people be like, oh, well, you know what, the power company did this, they didn't do their job. And that's just one example of how rich people, you have to be responsible for not just yourself, but for other things around you to make sure things go correctly and that your system stay in place so you can continue earning money. And that's one responsibility that rich people tend to take on. So that's just an example of the wealth file for the first wealth file. And I'll go ahead and hand it over to Serge to do the second one.
Yeah, the second one, rich people the money game to win. Poor people play the money game to not lose. And I think this is super important to like think about, because like I used to play the money game this way when I was younger. Like I used to play the money game to like just not to lose, just to get my car payments paid, just to get like my rent paid, just work enough to cover these expenses. And the problem with that mindset is that it's very limited. It's very limited because you're not thinking in abundance, and you're not thinking what you can actually create with wealth. And since you're not thinking of like, how can I make more? Why does this work like this? You're not questioning how money works. You're not educating yourself on how to expand your wealth. And I think that's the difference with a lot of people. A lot of people just work to get by, to live comfortably, but they fail in the aspect of like, okay, what is this thing called money? Why is there interest rates? Why do taxes work this way? And when you start questioning these things, it opens up the board game to a completely different set of rules that poor people don't have access to, that now you'll be able to play by to get ahead even further. So I think it's really, really important for people to understand financial literacy and like stuff like that to get ahead.
Well said. Well said.
For you to start asking, for you to get to this level of actually being curious about financial literacy, were you or anybody on here, was it a matter of overcoming something? Like, were you not successful to the point where you got frustrated, or did it just come naturally? Were you like failing financially and that's what made you actually start wanting to learn more about finances? Or was it just like, kind of speak a little bit on that if the broad question makes sense?
I think it makes perfect sense. I can go ahead and talk about it first. Well, as some of y'all know, I started in the fitness industry.
Sure.
I was a personal trainer, saved money. And I was like, okay, trading time for money, especially in this vehicle, doesn't work as a 1099 contractor. So I need to own a gym. So I moved back to my parents, started saving money, and I invested in the gym. Basically, I had 3 other partners. The reason why I tell you guys this is because like to kind of set the stage for what I'm trying to say. The gym that I invested into, because they had a pretty big gym, but they were moving. It was 25,000 square foot, and it was in literally Long Island, New York, super competitive market, one of the most expensive and very competitive states, and one of like the richest countries in the world. So when I say we were doing business like at a high level, we were doing business at a high level. But I thought they were good at what they were doing. But it turns out they just didn't. We were operating in a space where they didn't have competition. So when Planet Fitness came around, and they just took I think it was either 100 million or $1 billion to start with their $10 a month campaign or $20 a month black card. We didn't know how to compete, and we couldn't shift and do things the right way. And because I was only a 10% partner, I was powerless. And then so our overhead was 85 grand a month. So when I was so I'm just like, so I'm going through my own money files up here and my own business files up here, and like it just wasn't making sense. And I'm like, there's no way I'm missing something. And then when that, and also me betting all the money I had, also borrowing money, I was scrambling crazy, and it really hit me. I was like, yo, holy moly, like I'm smoked. So I went back to real estate, making money there, putting into the gym, so on and so forth. And I was like, all this stuff about, this is why, like when I was making the comment earlier, I wasn't trying to say anything like bad or negative to Prince Adebayo.
Yeah.
I was saying
you're just keeping it a stack. You're just keeping it a stack.
I was keeping it a stack. I was like, that's a funny comment. And I was back when I was your age, because like that's like early 20s. So maybe I opened the gym when I was like 25-ish. So he's probably like a few years younger than I was then. I used to think that reading was cool, but I didn't think reading was cool, but I thought it was necessarily evil. I didn't understand the importance of being really, really financially literate. And more importantly, how like that internal blueprint, as we're talking about in here, is part of the external. I knew it was important. I knew I wanted it, but I didn't understand the rules of the game. I didn't have good financial systems. I had financial systems that were strong enough for where I was, but not for where I was trying to go. So for me, that changed everything. I started like just basically buying books, reading books, and scrambling per se. So like that's what happened to me personally, to answer your question. And I try and tell this to as many young people as I can, especially I want to say men, like young men of color, because I feel like our communities, it's like we see the rappers, we see like the ballers, we see this and the third. It's not necessarily, you don't see people who are super duper financially like savvy, who from like the investment world, who look like us. And you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, yo, if you can read some of these books, so on and so forth. But hopefully that answers your question without going too far, because I want to add some context as well.
Yeah, no, I asked really for the people that in the future, if anything, would listen to this, right? Because, you know, a lot of times I want to put positive information in front of people, but I ask myself, is it a matter of them coming to it when they're ready type shit, right? And we just put out the information, or is there something that we could do to get this information in front of them, or at least show them the importance of it? So I was asking from that point of view, but thank you for
No, I
sharing.
love that. I love that. No way, because like way to think ahead and way to be really thoughtful for like the greater group. Because to your point, half it too is exposure and awareness. Because if people see somebody's results crushing it and they realize, oh, the difference between them and where I am is just financial literacy or just information. Like think about it, it's almost like a video game. 'Cause I used to play video games a lot. If you see somebody doing like some dope thing that allows them to get more kills or have a better kill to death ratio, you're like, what? Like how are they doing that? And you want to copy it. So I think it's also exposure. So I don't know, does anybody have anything else they want to chime in on that before we go to point number 3? Going once, going twice, and all right, let's go to point number 3. So rich people are committed to being rich. Poor people want to be rich. And it's funny because like, so Tate, he'll talk about this sometimes. He'll be like, he's like, there's want and there's want. He's like, I want to learn how to figure skate, but I don't want to take the time to practice, to train, to do this and do the third. However, where I want something, like I wanted money, and then he talked about how he was really logical about it. Chess player. Okay, what is money? How does it work? Where is it happening? I'm saying so on and so forth. And then that, and like, so basically, that's when we start talking about being committed. Are you committed? Are you really committed to that process? Are you willing to like, let's just say, make sacrifices? Maybe, I don't want to say sacrifice sleep because like that's a health thing, but are you willing to sacrifice sleep? Are you willing to work 16 hours a day? Are you willing to risk it all and still lose? Because just because you have a chance to win also means you have a chance to lose. Rich people are, because again, going with the point number 2, rich people play the money game to win, but they're not necessarily worried about losing, because if they lose, they're going to be in the same poor position anyway. So they say to themselves, oh, okay, how do I play this game to win? How do I do it in a way where I'm committed, but at the same time, it's risk adjusted to mitigate that risk and ideally give me a better chance of success. And again, going back to these mental wealth files, is about how you think about the game, which is going to implement your actions and how you play the game. So that's a quick synopsis on point number 3. And yeah, hand it off to Serge for point number 4.
Yeah, so point number 4, rich people think big, poor people think small. And I think the best thing when I thought about this quote is it goes back to when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. A lot of people, when they see something they want, they're like, I can't afford it. And the thought process ends immediately. They completely tell themselves they can't do something and that's the end of it. But instead, what they should do is what can do does, and be like, I can't do anything, and be like, how can I afford it? Yeah, and be like, how can I afford this? How can I make more money? How can I, when you start asking yourself the questions to make you start brainstorming ideas or ways to think, you start to come up with solutions. They might not be the best solutions, but they're still solutions. There was a thing I did recently, like 3 months ago, actually, where somebody told me, okay, you know what you want, you know where your goal is. I want you to write 20 like ways you can get there. And the great thing about this task that he gave me is like the first 5 to 10, you'll realize are very simple. You'll come up with ways to get there and you're like, okay, but the last 10 to 15, that's when you really have to think, because those are really hard to crank out, like, oh shit, how can I make this work? And it's crazy because usually the last couple ones you start coming out with are actually really solid ideas. They probably require more work, but this amount of brainstorming has allowed me to really come up with various income streams to help me become financially independent a little bit faster. So definitely always be brainstorming, be thinking big, so that way you're getting ahead and you want to reach the goals that you want, for sure.
Beautiful. Well said. All right. So wealth file number 5. Rich people focus on opportunities, poor people focus on obstacles. So that, I mean, there's a few ways that the author goes through this in the chapter, but the main takeaway here is, what do you focus on is going to expand. Where energy goes, attention flows, and your results will follow. So the reason why I say that here is, rich people, they focus on the opportunities, poor people focus on the obstacles. There's a great, actually, when I saw this, I thought of the example by Simon Sinek. He talked about how he had just run like a 5K with a friend. And then as part of the 5K, they had free Gatorade and bagels, but there was a line. And then he's like, so Simon Sinek, who's the person who wrote Start With Why, basically, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but he's a pretty famous public speaker. But he turns to his friend, he's like, hey, by the way, A, B, and C, let's go get some bagels. And the friend's like, nah, the line's too long. He's like, oh yeah, but it's a free bagel, like it's not that bad. And oh no, it's not worth it because A, B, and C. And it would have been like a 10-minute wait. But his friend was only seeing the obstacle where he was seeing the opportunity, aka the free bagel, the free Gatorade, you don't have to spend money on the way back and then go ahead and start their day. And it's very similar on that because rich people, they focus on the opportunity, they realize there's still going to be risk, but then again, going back to risk mitigation, they focus on how to lower the risk and go ahead and take advantage of the opportunity because half the battle of recognizing the opportunity is just starting and taking action. So I think that's probably the best way for me to sum up that particular point. There are different examples in here, but for the interest of time, and we can always like chat more about this later on, even if it's Q&A, but for the interest of time, let's go ahead and keep it moving. The next
Hold up,
one.
before we move on, I just want to at least add this to at least give a little,
Yeah.
I want to add value to it. It actually goes back to the mindset that Serge was saying about Robert Kiyosaki's thought process, right? So rich people focus on opportunities, poor people focus on obstacles. When you ask yourself, how can I, by default, you're actually asking for an opportunity, right? You allow that question to come up with opportunity or solutions versus, I thought about this before, so I'm glad Serge brought it up, but the opposite question is typically why the fuck, right? So like if you're struggling, so I could speak on the struggle side of it, the focus on obstacles. So if you're going through something, you're like, why do I have to go through this or why, etc. And the crazy thing is that you get the answer to that, but to Serge's point and Robert Kiyosaki's point, that's not the right question because it's not going to lead to the right answer. So I used to say this often is shitty questions lead to shitty answers. Quality questions lead to quality answers.
Well said. Thanks for adding that.
And then the last one is rich people admire other rich and successful people, poor people resent rich and successful. I mean, and I think this is pretty obvious, guys. Like we see it all the time. Like there's rarely ever something I've noticed is like whether it's Fresh or other people that are extremely successful, a lot of the times they don't punch down on people that are broke or that are trying. A lot of the times they're willing to help. And because of this, I've grown to admire a lot of very successful people. Granted, there's probably douchebags out there, but the majority of successful people always want to help others. And if you learn to admire that and to want to become like them, you're going to end up in a far better place than resenting or constantly hating on rich people and saying like, oh, you know, they got it all through this or that. You get nothing out of being negative. By being positive and actually trying to interact, trying to start a conversation, it opens up doors for you. So I really think it's important to kind of remember that. All right, let's move it on.
Let's keep it pushing.
Yeah.
All right. So building off of point number 6, rich people associate with positive, successful people, poor people associate with negative or unsuccessful people. And so in the book, and this is really just like another spin off of the point number 6, which Serge just spoke about. But in the book, to pull something out from there and getting back to the book a little bit, he speaks about how when he was invited, basically when he started making some money, he moved to a nice neighborhood. His kids were invited to another rich person's house in the neighborhood, and he actually kind of had that negative self-talk in terms of thinking negative about successful people. But then he met these people, they opened up the door, and they were the nicest people who he felt like he met. The same people who were the friend's parents, the kids' friends' parents, were like, oh, you gotta come to the barbecue and 7th this weekend, so on and so forth. I'm not taking no for an answer. And he was just so struck by how warm and polite and kind they were. And then while sitting during the barbecue, they were talking about the different volunteering things that they've done, who leads what organizations, so on and so forth. And they all made different commitments to each other's organizations. And it really just changed his wealth file. And on the flip side, talking about poor people and then how they associate with negative or unsuccessful people. Simply put, like attracts like. And part of the reason why that is, you're going to be the average. We talk about this all the time. You're going to be the average of like the 5 or so people you spend the most time with. So by associating with and staying around with negative or unsuccessful people, literally and figuratively, you make it harder to get lucky, and you also make it harder to do what you know you need to do to put yourself out of that situation because the environment around you. I mean, I guess it's funny too because you see a lot of parallels based on what we're saying. Serge is talking about getting himself in the right space, which was Denver when he left California to make some stuff happen. Environment is everything. That's part of the reason why when I talk about situating my stuff here in Michigan, and then decide we can go ahead and get down to Miami and be around more like-minded people, you got to get in the right spot so the tide carries all the ship up with it. Instead of you just trying to roll your ship by yourself, let the tide elevate you instead of just trying to elevate yourself. So anyway, that's point 7 in a nutshell. Back to you, sir, for point number 8.
And so for point number 8, we have rich people are willing to promote themselves and their value. Poor people think negatively about selling and promotion. And I think a lot of this comes from, when you're younger, you hear about salespeople and how like they're the devil and they're selling snake's oil and it's terrible. But in reality, like if you are someone that is offering something of value, like Candu, for example, if you could get people shredded and help them in their fitness and he knows he has something of value, promoting yourself should be something you want to do, because not doing it, you're doing a disservice to yourself and the people you can help. And I think a lot of people, when they think of selling something, they don't realize that in not selling your value to others, you're actually not only hurting yourself, but you're hurting everyone that you cannot help. And it is your responsibility, I believe, to be able to do that, because you could change so many people's lives. So people like Fresh now that do the CEO network, and you see people always helping each other. I think that's super important. And having that mindset when it comes to selling is super important. I think a lot of people just have this negative mindset of what selling and promoting is, because you always hear it. But, if you have seen something of value, I highly, highly always encourage people to try it out, because you never know where you're going to end up and who you can help.
Yeah, and what comes to mind as well is a book that I had read from, it was called Sell or Be Sold by Grant Cardone, right? And it talks about that, bro. It's like, bro, if to some degree, bro, you have to understand this anyway. You have to position yourself to sell something. And again, I'm learning, I'm still developing and getting comfortable with actually promoting something. So I'm speaking from an education perspective. However, if you're not selling something, by default, you're being sold. You know what I mean? So like at the end of the day, it's like, if you're not okay with selling something, understand that every transaction in your life, you're buying something. So if you want to live from that position, cool, but you have to get to the point of at some point transitioning and being okay with selling something. Okay, you're going to always consume, but get in the game by promoting something, by trying to provide value some way. So Sell or Be Sold by Grant Cardone, and valid point, Serge.
Well said. We should definitely add that to the book. Actually, we'll also the 10X rule. Grant Cardone, he has some really great stuff. I mean, I know people are so on it, but we'll talk more about that later. All right, so let's hop on to you know what I'm saying, but no, he's great people. All right, so all right, rich people are bigger than their problems, poor people are smaller than their problems. So this is a really good one. And it's funny too, because like this, even like look what's happening with Tate, like great example. So essentially, when problems arise, rich people, let's say to themselves, oh, okay, how do I figure this out? How do I grow into somebody who can handle this issue? So on and so forth. Or when we start talking about people who aren't so well off financially, part of it has to do with the mentality. Why is this happening to me? Oh my goodness, did you hear about this? Oh, did you hear about that? And they're basically waiting for their turn to complain. And this goes back to poor people associating with negative or unsuccessful people. It's about having that growth mindset versus not. And basically staying stagnant, or even by staying stagnant, you're actually going back or going in reverse, because everything is constantly moving forward. So anyway, rich people, they either focus on being bigger than their problems, or growing into somebody who can handle those problems. And by growing themselves into somebody who can handle those problems, they now put themselves in a better position to handle the issues. And because there's always going to be pros and cons of everything. But by growing themselves into somebody who can handle bigger problems, they can now handle more money, now handle the bigger systems that come with managing more people, or creating more value, or promoting themselves, or selling more products, whatever the case may be. So that's essentially the point 9 in a nutshell. And we can talk more about that if there's more questions or comments later on. But
yo, can I touch on 10? Can I quick go over 10?
Yeah,
go for it.
So rich people are excellent receivers, poor people are poor receivers. So I'm just going to give a quick story. I was at a Panera Bread, and a gentleman with his family, I struck conversation with him, and he ended up asking, do you want food? And I was like, nah, you know what I mean? I'm super big on not taking stuff from people, right? But we ended up having a decent conversation. He's a pastor, and I ended up taking it, bro. I ended up taking it, but to this point is I held on to it and gave it to somebody else. So I'm speaking about this because even though I took it, I still was not okay with kind of taking it. You know what I'm saying? I was like, yeah, you know what I mean? But I didn't want to use it. One is a little bit of my backstory. I've come around people that always give, but they always want something in return, or they got this fucking attitude about it. It's like, whatever, bro. So I've grown to like not take things from people. But to this point, poor people are poor receivers. So, you know, after reading this, I was like, bro, come on, man. It's okay to receive things from people, and you're actually cutting out somebody else's blessing by not. This is what I learned from the book. Is you're cutting out somebody's blessing by not receiving. You know what I mean? By me telling him no, that's essentially fucking his blessing over. So it's okay to it's part of the process, and you have to be okay with it.
Well said. And to your point, thanks for sharing that. I actually was a poor receiver, still kind of am a poor receiver, because sometimes even like to still talk as part of the exercise, it'd be like, when you receive a compliment, just say thank you and don't say anything back. Don't even try to reciprocate it. You have to be good at receiving, because if you're not good at receiving, so you don't know, you know what I'm saying? It's crazy too, because like it is something I struggle like. So this point actually really resonated with me. I'm very similar to you. But now here's the thing about it, because if you're not good at receiving, then you're teaching the universe not to give to you. So somebody who's less deserving are going to get those same gifts that are meant for you. And now all of a sudden I'm not going to do this, not going to do right by it. And it's funny. This goes back to what Serge was saying, which is why I was like, yo, Andrew, quit fucking around. You have to start putting out fitness content, because now I see this guy V Shred Taper who's like, you know what I'm saying, like on YouTube, like you know what I'm saying, like doing all these. I'm like, yo, you know what? This guy knows what he's talking about, but he's a better marketer than me. He's a better promoter than me, and he kind of knows what he's talking about, but he's getting himself out there where I feel like where I can at least add similar value or maybe even more value in a different way. But like he's getting those eyeballs, he's getting that attention, he's doing this, and I don't want to say like he has like ultimate motives or anything, but I feel like I could be doing it from a much more pure place, in a way that's going to allow people to get more value and do something with it immediately without having to pay money, and ideally make the world a better place. Which, if people are more fit, and because strong body, strong mind, strong actions, and strong beliefs, and then ideally a strong and better country, so that way we go less and less down like that wrong path. But anyway, this is a great point. Thanks for adding that, Bison, because you hit it right in the head and really resonated with me as well. So let's move on to point number 11. Start to let you handle that, and I'll take 12.
So rich people choose to get paid by selling results. Poor people choose to get paid based on time. And I mean, it's obvious, you know, people that get paid based on time, you're limited. Even if you start earning over 6 figures, you're still very limited by the time that you're putting in. Where if you start figuring out how to grow businesses and getting paid by the results and the value you're providing, the sky's the limit at that point. So understanding that as you scale your income, it's great to have that in mind and to do it, but start learning or start figuring out ways of how can I now trade my time and my money to make more money and to create results and value to bring me more money. Once you start figuring that out, it changes everything, because at that point, you're not tied to having to show up to an employer's office, or just in general, having someone pay you every 2 weeks to be successful. You can just do whatever the hell you want. And I think that changes everything.
Well said, definitely does. All right, let's keep it moving. Point 12, rich people think both, poor people think either or. So simply put, the author talks about that. He's like, oh, okay, well, some people will be like, oh, do I want to be really successful, or do I want to have family time? That's an either or, and that's what poor people think. Rich people are like, all right, great. How, getting back to what Serge was saying before, how do I do both, right? And they set the life up like that. What's more important, A or B, C or D? And there are different options, and you can go ahead and insert whatever is important to you, or whatever you hear other people talking about. But rich people always say to themselves, how do I get both? And he makes another example. What's more important, money or your arm or your leg, or whatever the case may be? You got situations, both are important. So figure out how to make them both important to you, and then you can be smart about how you go ahead and move throughout life to get both of those things. Be strategic about life. All right, let's keep moving to point 13. All right, Serge, that's on you, unless you want me to take it.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to mute myself. Rich people focus on their net worth. Poor people focus on their working income. And it kind of goes back to what I was just saying. Like, once I started making a certain amount of working income, I started realizing that my net worth is more important, because you start paying off debt, you start growing, you know, your real estate portfolio. And at the end of the day, the bigger your net worth is, the more money you'll have to leverage to keep growing and scaling whatever it is you're doing. So that is kind of why I push Mint so much, because the Mint app actually tells you your net worth. And once you figure that out, you're like, oh, this is what's causing my net worth to suck. How can I fix it? And then going forward, how can I continue to grow it? And by understanding that, it'll open up a lot of doors.
Boom. Well said. All right, thanks for the heads up about timing, Bison. Appreciate you, brother. All right, so 14, rich people manage their money well, poor people mismanage their money well. So simply put, and this goes back to Mint and then managing your money, and he goes on to there's a few different points to unpack here, but the important part is you have to manage your money, and if you're not good at it, you gotta make it a priority regardless. He actually offers a jar scenario in terms of a way to think about how to allocate your money. And because I think this is actually a sub point, I want to go ahead and let Bison come on here and just speak a little bit more, because like this is a point that he seemed to be pretty passionate about, and he sent me a photo of how he had to square it off. But if not, I'll talk about like the different jars and yeah. So let's go ahead and do that real quick.
Yeah, for sure. I'll quick talk about this. First of all, I became aware of this when I read, I believe it was Rich Dad Poor Dad years ago, and I started applying it, but I wasn't consistent. So I'm gonna quick share it and then speak my perspective on what the benefits are. So it says, talk about 10%. It says 10% into long-term savings from spending account or for a spending account, 10% into an education account. You put 50% into necessities account and 10% into a giving account, right? So just start allocating your money. And I think it's not so much about how much it's going in. I think it's about changing the mental framework you have. So I think initially we're created to consume, right? So we're constantly consuming. And by simply applying this at a small scale, by the time you do start making big money, then you can get to the point of actually managing it correctly. So that's kind of what I got from applying this or learning and becoming aware of this.
No. That's perfect. That's perfect. Yep. So and that was the 80%. He also had two more buckets at 10 and 10 each, and that's going to be your money for long-term investing, and then also the money that you have to spend right now, because you need to have the yin to that yang. Because yeah, you want to put away that money for long-term investment, but you also gotta have the money to blow at the end of each month. So that way you feel alive. And here's the reality situation: anybody could die at any point in time. One of us could die tomorrow, or even later today. So you want to also be able to take some of those chips off the table, regardless. But yeah, and then I guess the last part too is focus on managing your money, regardless. To start with wherever you are, just be aware of how much is going out. Even if you're losing money every month, how much is going out, and just track it. Because once you can track it, then you can manage it. And then once you can manage it, you can start to go ahead and put different things in place to hold on to it. And it even goes as far as saying, if you have to borrow money to pay your bills, borrow $1 more and then manage that extra dollar, because it's a mentality up here, as Bison was saying. Because once you get that mentality and that habit down, that's what's going to allow you to make changes.
And I want to add to this point as well is for those that don't have a business, I remember when I did apply, it was beneficial for me. And after reading this book, I will continue to. But also paying yourself first. If you don't have a business that's generating money and you're not used to making money or paying yourself, typically we use our money for other people. We spend it on bills or other pretty much consuming. So just by applying this, you get in the habit of putting some money on the side for yourself. And just that habit alone is a good habit to start building into your life.
Right. Well said. All right, Serge, take it away.
Yeah. Rich people have their money work hard for them. Poor people work hard for their money. And yeah, I mean, this goes into the same thing we've been talking about. Once you get in a good position with your money jars, you'll start having a fund where you can start putting your money work for you and start investing it into things. And then you're just starting to build, and it's so much easier after that. And to touch on what Bison said, I know earlier you were asking, like, what did you guys do to get you to that point? I don't think you realize it, but like, you're doing it now. Like, the fact that you're allocating your jar system, the fact that you're thinking about this before you start making the money, that's the starting point. That's what you should be doing. So you're already doing it. And by the time you start making money, you're going to know exactly what to do with it. There's a lot of people, that's why NBA players get into fucking problems. They start making the money, they don't know what to do, and they're just blowing it. So by you asking these questions and you already doing just something as simple as the jars or just allocating your money, understanding how to use it, you're already doing the actions that you have the questions for. And I don't think you're even realizing it, which is kind of cool. Because once you, in 2-3 years from now, you're going to be so much further ahead from the person you are today. And that's kind of the end goal,
Well said. Well said. All right. So moving on to point 16, rich people act in spite of their fear, poor people let fear stop them. And basically this last part is just more or less acting, basically taking action and applying what you're learning. So saying we're sitting here talking about this, we're talking about this particular book. If you're on this call, maybe you didn't get a chance to read the book, or maybe you did, ask yourself, what's like the one key thing I'm going to take today or take from this book and start doing? And if you haven't started anything, I can't think of a finer point than managing your money. And even if that sounds too daunting, just track your money. Make sure you track every penny. Just start that. And then all of a sudden do that for a few months, maybe even 6 months, maybe a full year. Then all of a sudden, then you're like, oh, okay, I'm used to this now. What's the next step? It's almost like walking. Because if you want to run, if you want to build up to running, maybe just start walking. Maybe you walk like a half mile, quarter mile, whatever the case may be. So anyway, the important part of point 16 here is rich people act in spite of their fear. Poor people let the fear stop them. And this is also part of the reason why it's so important to have a network. Serge is talking about, is you said Kyle, right? Who was thinking about investing in a property. He's like, if it wasn't for having that network around him, that fear might have stopped him, and with good reason, because there are very serious financial consequences for buying a house. That you're literally signing an obligation to make payments for 30 years, 15 years, whatever the case may be, unless you have it rented. So again, rich people, they take their time without wasting time to study what they need to study, get the best information they can, and then they act and make a decision regardless. And that gives them the chance to get lucky. And then also with the research, it also mitigates the risk. So if they can get lucky, they're flexible in terms of options. All right, so Serge, I'll give it to you for the last one here.
So rich people constantly learn and grow. Poor people think they already know. And I mean, it goes. Internet is not working.
Oh, no,
so yeah,
you're back, unless it's me.
Yeah, no, that was me. My bad. My internet's a little wonky. So yeah, basically rich people are constantly learning. And that's why I like reading these books and joining on these calls, even though I've read some of these, because there's a lot of nuggets that I'm even learning from you guys that I hadn't thought about. And I think always trying to expand your mind and learn about these things is super important. And a lot of the people that don't take the initiative to read these books and to jump on and to keep an open mind, they're going to be left behind by people that are, and that's just the way it is in this world. It's very competitive. So understanding that you're always going to be growing, always going to be learning. I think that's going to put you ahead in life.
Well said, because I'll tell you what, it's crazy. The world is changing so fast. You can go to the next slide because we're basically done. The world is changing so fast. So the things that you are doing, you got to figure out a way how to automate it and then continue growing and learning, because if not, you will get left behind. And if you get left behind, especially as a man, you're fucked, because nobody's going to care about you the same way they'll care about women and children. So you have to, it is imperative. And to Serge's point, I'm very much aware. I'm not going to push this any harder than I have to in terms of this book club, but I'm very much aware of who's coming to these calls and whatnot. I'm keeping that in the back of my mind, because if shit happens and I hit it big, and there's an opportunity to invest with people, I'm only it's not because I want the whole network to win, and I will invest with the whole network. But make no mistake about it, people who are here when they don't have to be, when it's just okay, on a Sunday, on Father's Day, you're here for an hour to really up your game and growth, that shows dedication. And even back to the small things of taking action, even if you're unsure where it's going to lead, but it's the right move. It's the small things that add up over time, and people are always watching. So anyway, that's the book in a nutshell. Thank y'all for hanging out a little bit past 4 o'clock. So it was a little bit more than an hour, but to be fair, we actually got done kind of quickly because we started about 10 minutes after. Because of the nature of the way this book was laid out, as far as the conclusions and points per chapter, there was really no need to have it. So it was excluded here from the end of it. And I think let's just go ahead and open up the floor for questions, comments, or concerns before we end it. So anybody have anything to say, questions or comments or anything of that nature?
Yeah, I got one comment. So I didn't read the book personally, but I got a lot of value from this call. So the main point, at least for me, was the one about self-promotion. Because that's something that I've been trying to work on recently in the past few months. And one actionable habit that I've been implementing in my own life is every single day sending 5 opens to other people. And by open, I mean that could be an Instagram DM, message on LinkedIn, or just approaching someone in real life. And I try to force myself every day. I have to create 5 new opens. And even if just 1% of those people actually get back to me, that could be a potential new client, potential new partnership somewhere down the line.
Well said. And that's a beautiful way to apply what we're talking about. And I'll tell that's how it starts. And then before you know it, You're like, okay, cool, no way responded. How about I make it 10? How about I make it 15? How do I automate this now? Like I'm sending out like 2,000 of these. Then all of a sudden that 1% now becomes 20 people per month. And that, you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's how it starts and goes back to that promotion aspect. Excellent job, continue. And ideally, hopefully this session inspires you to and maybe even reach out more, especially as you build the ability and the infrastructure to do so. So thanks for sharing, Sid. Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns? It doesn't have to be a comment, it could be a question. It doesn't have to be a question, it could be a comment.
I got a question. Y'all can hear me?
Yeah.
I know this might sound dumb, but what's the name of the book y'all reading again?
Yeah,
I
no,
was-
it's right here.
Yeah, I just saw the link in the chat.
Yeah,
but
no
that-
worries. My
The
bad.
book-
I keep cutting you off. Go ahead, brother. My bad.
Yeah, the book, because I was listening to everything I was saying, and it's very I guess I was inspiring. I want to read it, I want to tap in, I want to read the book. Because I like it.
It's called
Yeah.
The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. We'll
Okay.
I mean, you're still sharing your screen, right? Because I see it, right?
I don't know if he's looking at my shared screen.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, well said. So here, we'll put it in the chat for you because it's The Secret of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. You see here.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay, I got it. Cool.
Millionaire Mind.
All right.
Yeah, great book. You can also get the audiobook as well. And this book is old enough that you might even be able to get on YouTube. I'm not sure. I know some books you can find on YouTube for free, but if not, yeah, that's a book there. Also, I also have an extra hard copy too if need be, because I like to listen to audiobook. I must have listened to this book like maybe 8 times over this last couple of weeks because I just had to do my best to really download the information. Because one thing to read a book is another thing to study it and really ask yourself, how am I going to apply it, or what are like the 1, 2, 3 most important things that can apply. So, because you really want to sink deep into that subconscious mind. But yeah, so that's the name of the book. Questions, feel free to reach out if anything else is needed.
I appreciate
No, for sure. Anything else, gentlemen? Going once, going twice. All right, so meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for joining us on this beautiful Sunday. Enjoy.